Today there is going to be a focus on what government policies work and don't work using a narrative of four South African countries: Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria. So let's start by working from the most prosperous to the least prosperous countries, and then we can sum up what we have learned at the end. So back down to the most prosperous of the four countries, Botswana. We will be using data from the year 2016 since it is the most recent year of complete data. In 2016, Botswana had the highest GDP per capita of the four nations, coming in at about $17,000 per person. The Heritage Foundation gave them a 69.9 on the Index of Economic Freedom, which was 35th place worldwide. Given that they have an abnormally small population of only 2 million in a much larger nation, the ecosystem is something to note. Over 70% of the country is covered in desert, a very coincidental amount considering that also 70% of the nation's land has been open for communal grazing. The economy of the country is mixed. The government owns about half of the largest mining company and takes a large chunk of its government revenues from it. This other government income allows tax rates to be very low. The top bracket of the personal income tax is a mere 25%. Those factors, combined with easy access to investments, allow for Botswana to be the most prosperous and most free nation in sub-Saharan Africa. The second freest and wealthiest country is South Africa. With a score of 63, they are a mere 10% behind the economic freedom of Botswana, but fall to 77th in the world. Their GDP per capita is $13,000. You might have heard of Cape Town in the news recently, a city of almost 500,000 people who have declared a state of emergency because current freshwater supplies aren't expected to last another 6 months. They are expected to be the first major city in the world to run out of water. But why? It probably has to do with government interference in the water supply. The Constitution of South Africa states that everyone has the right to have access to sufficient food and water. Every economics student knows that if something is given away at no price, demand will always be much higher than the supply.
For our third place in GDP per capita, as well as economic freedom, we have to go back up north to Nigeria. With a GDP per capita of $6,000, they create only a third of the wealth per person that Botswana creates. This could certainly have to do with the fact that a majority of natural resources are controlled by the government, who has allowed the tragedy of the commons to persist in matters such as deforestation. In 2005, at the height of the problem, 1 in 8 of the country's trees were chopped down in just 1 year. Another important thing to mention would be that unlike the aforementioned countries, Nigeria isn't entirely based on a constitution or common law. A large percentage of the country is controlled by Sharia law, since almost half of the population is Muslim. Sharia law means that in general, families with multiple children that control larger businesses or corporations are more likely to be broken up in estates, leaving multiple smaller businesses lacking the appropriate economies of scale to compete on a global stage. Last and least, we have come to the nation of Zimbabwe. They rank 174th in the world out of 180 countries in their degree of economic freedom. A few huge factors contribute to their extremely low ranking. 1. The fact that the highest personal income tax rate is a huge 51.5%, meaning if you make a lot of money, the government gets more of it than you do. The other most important factor is that property rights are simply not enforced in Zimbabwe. This means if somebody comes over to your house and steals your briefcase full of cash, calling the cops won't do much. And who wants to work for a briefcase of cash when your neighbor could just take it away? The last hindrance on Zimbabwe's economy are the extremely strict labor laws. In many cases, labor contracts are signed for fixed terms of up to 16 years. The only way out of these labor contracts is if both sides agree to end employment. That certainly doesn't seem very free to me. So those are 4 differing sub-Saharan nations. All are mixed economies with miscellaneous resources being owned or controlled by the government, though some, like the mining industry in Botswana, thankfully aren't planned by the government. They instead operate on a market philosophy, which allows for real prosperity.